everybody, welcome back to Mount MoGraph. As always, my name's Matt. On deck today, we got Summit 52, an isometric low-poly world inside Cinema 4D. I got a whole bunch of requests for a low-poly summit, and I haven't done one in some time, so I figured this was a great way to come back. So in today's video, we're going to cover absolutely everything to create this nice poster for maybe like an environmental fund or something, or just flying whales. However you want to dumb it down. We're going to do something fun today inside Cinema 4D, so I hope you guys have a lot of fun with it. We're going to cover some older techniques we've covered in past low-poly videos, as well as a whole bunch of fresh new ones, and also some really nice modeling techniques to make your designs really pop. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D. I am using R15. I have not been able to upgrade to R16 yet, but I think R16 works great, or R15 works great. So let's go ahead and create a new project here. And something we're going to use quite a bit today is the Axis Center, which is a very, very powerful window. If you would like to use it, you can just right-click somewhere and go to Customize Palettes and just type in Axis Center. You can type as many of those letters as you want to get Axis Center to pop up. And once you do, you can drag it out and dock it somewhere. Now I have 2 copies of that, which is great. I love that window, so I'm just going to make a whole bunch of copies. And if you click it, it will pop up and you can dock it somewhere. I've chosen to put mine right over here, which is pretty helpful. So with that all set up, let's go ahead and start creating our scene. What we're going to do first is cover what isometric design is. So isometric is a cool kind of perspective or view on an object where things that are scaled are all in like perfectly how would I say this? They're all like perfectly structured. They're all in like a perfect grid. So when we look at this, you can see that there's actually a perspective or a scale from this point to this point. There's actually a bit of a diagonal angle to it. And when you go into isometric view, it's actually all a straight line, and you don't get any of that weird scaling that is a real world environment. So unlike a lot of people seem to think that aren't designers or just have never used isometric stuff before, is that you have to design your thing with that perspective in mind. Like you have to model your object in isometric design. So as you can see, I can zoom around this scene and I'm still not getting that isometric look, and I could spend a ton of time modeling an object, or I could use Cinema 4D's beautiful view selection. And if you go into cameras and down to Axometric and just release your mouse on this little dot here, it'll pop that menu out for us. Boom, look at this. We got an isometric view, and if we click it, now things are going to be perfectly lined up into this nice grid for us. So if I press Command R, you're going to see we have an isometric design already happening, and there's a whole bunch of other, I'll be honest, they're kind of horrible views you can go into, one of the worst being frog, which if you ever find a use for, let me know. I'd love to know what I can do with frog perspective, other than say it a lot. So let's go back into isometric view and just click a camera, and what that camera is going to do is take whatever view we currently had in the viewport and put that into the camera properties. As you can see, under the camera projection, we have isometric and isometric in our viewport. So let's close this little dropout and go to cameras, perspective, and we're back into perspective mode. So the reason we did this is because it's like a nice little shortcut to dig through some menus. So I'm zooming around right now in perspective view, and if I go and click my camera, it is going to take us into isometric view. So I've found that is just easier than going into camera and digging through these menus to get to isometric, because I'm a little lazy. So anyway, with that camera set up, let's call this lazy cam. And what we're going to do is just delete these cubes, because that was just an example. I'm going to save the scene to my desktop as Thingy3. And let's go ahead and just hide our camera from our viewport. I also have the grid turned off. If you go up into your filter and just unselect your grid, that is just going to hide it from the scene. And I don't want to see the camera in our viewport, so I'm going to double click the top traffic signal here and just hide it. So let's go ahead and create a cube. And maybe scale this guy up to 200%, hold shift if you would like, and press C to make this object editable. I'm going to call this layer guide. So what we're going to do is use this cube guide to create a nice isometric design, since isometric design is based on cubes. So we're going to use this as a kind of reference for our scene. So if I right click our guide and go to Cinema 4D tags, go down to display, I'm going to click this top option and use a shading mode of lines, and that's going to make this object into see-through lines, which is going to be great for lining up our scene. So this is just like going into your display mode up here and changing it to lines, but this would affect globally all your objects. And with this tag, you're just going to affect one object by itself. So let's go and click our guide cube and go into our basic mode. Under use color, let's click on and make this view color into a super bright neon so it sticks out in our scene. And if I do Command R, a quick preview, we're going to have a neon green cube, which looks bad. So let's hide this from our viewport. Render, if we double click our bottom traffic signal and make it red, it's no longer going to show up in our render, and we're all set to go. So let's go ahead and now create the water for our little glacier scene. If I hold Command and drag out this cube, I'm going to delete the display tag, get my neon cube rocking. I'm going to call this layer water, and double click the bottom traffic signal to make this visible in the render. Just make it actually so it's not green or red. Click the water and go down to use color and just turn this off, and we now have a cube in our scene. So let's go ahead and select our water layer, go up into our axis center and turn our axis point for the Y property down to -100 and click execute, and our axis point drops down to the bottom. So if I go into my right view, F3 on your keyboard, you can see that it is now at the very bottommost portion of my object. So if I turn this up to 50 or 49%, it's going to jump up halfway between the halfway point of our object. So that's just a really nice way. You can use this for X, Y, and Z properties to align your axis point perfectly with not a lot of effort instead of using this tool. So I'm going to click execute, and now I can scale it perfectly from that axis point. So let's go ahead and just drag down our Y property, holding shift, maybe make it 50%. And this is why a guide is nice, because it's now taking up exactly 50% of what I want the scene to look like, which is great. So let's go ahead and make our water into a nice low poly water. And how we're going to do this is actually using a bool object, and I will explain why we're going to use it as we go. Let's go ahead and create a new primitive. Let's go and create a sphere object, and under our sphere type, let's go and switch it to an isohedron so we have triangular polygons creating it. Scale this up a little bit so it's sitting on top of our entire cube and just about squashing it. Go into our sphere properties, make our segments maybe like 35, I don't know, any number you want, but keep it low because we want to do the low poly stuff. And we're going to delete our Phong tag. Our Phong tag is what smooths the edges between our polygons. So if I do a Command R to preview it, we have a perfect sphere. And if I delete the Phong tag, we're gonna, well, I guess we can still kind of have a perfect sphere. So I'll make this object editable as well because we have the render perfect option selected. If I delete that or make it editable, it'll delete that option. And now when I do Command R, we're gonna have the edges of our polygons. So let's go into our right view and lift our sphere up a little bit and squash it so it turns into a weird football, and just drop it down so it's sitting on top of our water. And what we're going to do now in our perspective view is just make sure it's covering all the way to the corners of our water. And with our sphere, which I should call water cutter maybe, hold shift and go into your deformers and grab a displacer, and that will immediately make it a child of your object. So let's go into our shading mode of our displacer and click a shader and grab a noise object, click our noise and go into noise type. And what we're going to do is click mod noise or a cell noise, either or. As you can see, they're based on squares, and since we're using isometric, let's keep the theme going together and click mod noise. So if I do Command R, you're going to see that our object now has some bumps to it. And if I go back into my displacer and the object portion, I can change the height, and that is going to be what we're going to use to cut out our water. So let's go and knock this up to, let's call it 53 centimeters. Looks great. And what we're going to do is right click our water cutter and go down to current state to object. And what that does is create an object from our water cutter property with a deformer on it. And if you just press C with this water cutter object, the deformer will still be there and affect our object. So if I drag it out, we'll lose that property. So I'll delete those layers, and as you can see, we have a water cutter with a nice popcorn explosion all over the polygons. So let's go into our array objects, grab a bool, and drop our water cutter in first, and secondly, drop in our water. And what that's going to do is cut out our water cutter from our water and give us a nice bumpy top. And the reason we used a bool instead of just the deformer on this object with segments is because we only wanted to affect the top portion of this object and keep it all perfectly in a square on the sides. So as you can see, that is a nice little trick to do that. And I'm going to name this bool water. So let's go ahead and create a material for this water. Double click into your material manager, go into your color, and under your texture, let's grab a Fresnel. And Fresnel is just a nice little gradient change based on the outermost area and the innermost area of your object. So on this gradient, let's make it into an icy blue ocean, sea. Lost all my words there for a second. But let's make the other side a little bit darker so we have a nice difference, and maybe grab our blend mode and turn it up a little bit. So this looks like cold ocean. I wouldn't want to jump in there. Turn your transparency on, and we're going to knock this down to, let's call it 97%. And on our refraction, put this to 1.33. Refraction is the bend of materials, or what you see through an object. As you can see, the gray lines are now bent, and as I change this, the background, what we see, changes. So put this to 1.33, which is the refraction rate of water in real life. And let's turn our absorption color to light blue, because we're trying to make water. So under our reflection, let's turn that dude on, and on our brightness, maybe 15% seems good. Texture, let's knock the Fresnel on and turn this down to 11%. So we'll throw our material onto our water bool, our entire thing. Do Command R to preview this, and there we go. We're starting to get a nice little gem look here, and it's gonna look sweet. So let's go ahead and now create the glacier that's going to be sticking through this water, creating all these wonderful ripples. So under our primitives, grab a landscape object. Turn your Y size up quite a bit and lift it up. And it's okay to have it sticking out of our guide cube, because that's actually what we want. We want it to come up right to the edge of the scene, so we get a nice dynamic look. Under our width and depth segments, let's turn this to just way lower so we get a nice low poly look. Let's go to maybe 35 and 31. I'm just guessing numbers here. And turn our rough furrows way up, so we get nice amount of bumps, and also our fine furrows. I don't know. That's a funny word, furrows. So there we go. It's looking pretty dang sweet. If I do Command R, we're going to have kind of rounded edges, which actually doesn't look bad for the scene. I might actually, even though it's a low poly scene, keep the Phong tag on this guy, because I kind of look how it is like, since it's not a lot of polygons, it can't smooth a lot, but we kind of get a nice look to that. So I think I'm going to keep that actually. So let's make this landscape editable by pressing C on the keyboard. We'll go into our right view, F3 on your keyboard, and actually squash this guy, because we want to have some room for the whales we're going to make to play. And I'm just going to move this back, and as you can see, the guide is kind of helpful. I'm going to lift the topmost point of our landscape to the top of our cube, and maybe go into my front view, and also scale this down a little bit and maybe squish it on over to the side. So back in my perspective view, I'm happy with how that mountain is looking, or glacier. Let's use another bool object to cut this glacier out, and yeah, just get it looking sweet. So I'm going to go into my array objects, grab a bool, drop my landscape in first. Well, actually, I would have dropped it in second, but I didn't have the object I needed. So let's grab a guide object, hold Command, and just duplicate that guy. Delete the display tag, make it visible in the render, and go back to your guide layer and just turn your color off. And then we're going to drop this into our bool underneath our landscape, or maybe above. No, we want it underneath. And under your bool properties, let's change A intersect to B. And there we go, we've now cut out a mountain. Sometimes a bool object will actually cut out a hole in your polygon, and if that happens, click this option here, create single object, and that'll just ensure that it creates a single object and doesn't leave any gaps. So I like how this bool looks. Let's press C to make this guy editable, and call this maybe Glacier Big Boy. As you can see, it's late here. It's 1:33, so the words I use don't make any sense. And I'll just make this guy completely solid object, and that looks sweet. Let's go ahead and take a look over at the side here. So as you can see, if I turn a little bit, we're starting to get all kinds of crazy lines, and that happens when an object is sitting right on top of each other. So since we used a bool to cut this object out, and we used the same size bool both times, the object is sitting on the same exact area, and that's why we get this weird discoloration here. So what we're going to do is grab our Glacier Big Boy, and in our access center, just use the Y, knock it down to -0 or -100, and this is going to jump our access point to the very bottom of our glacier, and then I can just scale this down the smallest little amount, so 0.3% smaller, and that's just going to be now on a different area, and it's going to look like it's sitting right up next to the glass. So one thing I should probably mention is my render settings. If you go and click in your render settings, I have ambient occlusion turned on, and if you don't have it on, it's going to look like this, which is pretty atrocious, and I normally wouldn't show anyone that, but if you turn on ambient occlusion, it's pretty much an instantaneous fix to getting your scene to look a little bit better. So this is looking all right. I promise it's going to look good when we're all done. And maybe what we should do with our Glacier Big Boy is delete our Fong tag and get a little bit harder cuts. Yeah, I actually do like that better. And now we're getting all kinds of more reflections. So one thing is on our water layer, let's right click, go to Cinema 4D tags and click the all powerful compositing tag. And we're going to make it so our water can't cast shadows, because once we add lights to the scene, the shadows are going to make it really hard to actually see what's going on under the water. So just trust me on this. We're going to turn off the shadows, and there shouldn't be a massive difference now, but it's going to really help us down the road. So there we go. It's looking pretty good. Why don't we throw some lights into the scene and see what we can start doing to get this looking a little bit better before we go and make some whales and have them fly around. So we'll create a new light object. Let's make an aerial light. And what we're going to do is right click our aerial light, go to Cinema 4D tags and down to target tags, and drop our Glacier Big Boy into our target object. And what this does is tells the object, the light object, to always face the target object, which is really nice and a lazy way to position lights in a scene. So if I go into my light object, make sure my shadow is turned on to area, and I'm going to go to the color and make this an icy Arctic blue, just like everything else in the scene. Under details, let's go down to fall off and change it to inverse square physically accurate so we get a nice fall off glow. And I'm going to just make it so it barely goes to the bottom of the water and maybe pull this guy back a little bit and drop it down. And as you can see, positioning lights is so much easier when you have a target on them, because you can never not be facing the right object. So let's see, we're getting some nice glows on this side, and I do have some aliasing going on in there, but we'll tweak that near the end of this video. And if I go into my light, I'm just actually going to duplicate this object, just drag it out, and this one was also going to have that tag, so it's always going to be facing the object properly. And just position this actually more in the front, because we have a nice blue glow coming from the back. So if I go and put this guy kind of in the front-ish area, something like this, that looks good. Let's make a nice sun splash. So all we're going to do is go into our general settings and change our color to a kind of dusky or dusk. I don't even know what dusk means really. It's like nighttime. Let's change it to a light orange, a tangerine orange, and now our scene is going to start to get those cool shadows, and that's looking nice. So I'm going to call this layer warm, or worn, I think I typed. Yep, and I'll call this one cold. And then let's actually create one more light. So just duplicate this light and put it way above the scene and scale this up so it's going down about halfway down your glacier. We're going to call this global. And we're going to make our global light pretty white and just turn the intensity down. And that's just going to fill in some of those shadows so they're not quite as hard. And yeah, maybe 25% looks good. So that's looking good. I'm actually going to grab all my lights and do Alt-G to put them in an object together. And I'm going to call them lights. Just so they're nice and easy to see. Let's go ahead and jump into our isometric view via the lazy cam, and see how we're doing. So our scene is actually facing the wrong way, and when you're in an isometric mode, I cannot rotate the camera. I can only position it and scale it in and out. Sorry for making you guys sick with that. Let's grab all of our objects and put that into a new null object, and I'm going to call this scene null. And then I'll just rotate my scene null until it's facing the correct direction for what I want with my isometric design. So there we go. That is looking good. Now the mountain thing is facing the camera, and it's looking pretty good. So we'll jump out of our lazy cam view back into perspective. Make sure to save your project, and we probably need to throw some kind of color onto our glacier because it's looking very boring. Let's create a new material. In our material manager, go up to our color and select a gradient here. Click into your gradient mode, go down to type and select a 2DV. And what we're going to do is create a nice change from white near the bottom and to the top where the ice is going to be of this glacier. We'll put this to a nice ice blue and just change your blending mode so it's really tight near the top. And then we'll go into our reflection, turn it on, and just knock it up to, let's call it 66, so we get all kinds of nice sheen. And actually under your luminance, let's turn this on too. We'll turn it up to like maybe 9, and what this is going to do is just make our material a little bit brighter so the shadows aren't as hard. So let's drop this material onto our glacier, and you might have to pop down your scene null. And now when I do a render, it's starting to look a little bit better. We have some work to do still, but as it sits, I think it's all right. I might actually toggle down my lights. In my my warm light, I might make my fall off just by scaling it up a little bit bigger, maybe position this a little bit above the scene, just so the scene's brighter. And so there we go, it's starting to look kind of cool. Let's go ahead and hold Alt and double click our traffic signals for our scene null just to hide it right now so we can focus on making whales. So I found these two images online here. I know they're different. I've got a orca whale and I've got a blue whale, just for references of when we create this polygon object or polygon animal, which we kind of touched base on in the ultimate low poly video. So let's go ahead and you can download these in the video description if you would like to use the same ones, or you can just do a Google search and find some. So anyway, what we're going to do is go into maybe our right view. And go into our attribute manager, click mode and go down to view settings, and then click back. And under our image, let's drop our whale side view into our image. And then I'll turn the transparency up to, let's call it 59%, and then go back into Cinema. And so this is just placing an image in the background. It's not actually in the scene. It's only in this view. So that's another nice thing about the viewport and images. So let's go ahead and use the ultimate low poly technique to model a nice orca whale for the scene. So what we're going to do is first create a loft NURBS. Actually, it's actually not called a NURBS anymore. I'm still saying that from R14. Let's go and grab a loft guy. I'll substitute that and go into our splines and grab a let's call it an end side, and we'll just rotate our end side negative 90 degrees so it's facing the proper direction, and position this somewhere and place it into our loft. So what our loft is going to do, if we duplicate our end side, we're going to be able to create an object. So if you haven't seen the low poly video, ultimate low poly video for modeling animals, this is the same technique that I used for that. So what we're going to do is just grab our end side, move it to the starting point of this whale, and just scale it down. So something I've actually started to do when I'm modeling like this, if you can't really see this line and you have an object you're trying to see, if you go up into your filter and just turn off your axis point, you won't see the handles, but if you know what you're pressing, you're all good. So it just makes life a little bit easier. So I'll scale this down and move it over, and then just hold Command and copy it, and just scale it up as needed. So we have this animal here, and this doesn't have to really be perfect. This is kind of quick for now, but rotate it if you need to, and just get a nice kind of base shape to your animal. There we go. And then if I go into my scene, I now have a beautiful whale body in the works. If I go into my loft, you can see the subdivision is quite high on here. And one thing also is that it has these rounded edges, which are no good if we're making low poly. So let's click linear interpolation, and that's going to make the edges hard again. And then we'll go into our subdivisions, and let's just turn this down until we get rid of all those lines, because we want the most basic shape possible for this low poly look. So I'll turn that down to 2. And you don't want to go too low because then your object disappears, but that looks, yeah, not right. Unless, let's see. Yeah, I went too low. I lost the shape of my object. So I have 7, 2, and 5 for the settings, and then I'll delete my Fong tag on here. And we have this beautiful low poly whale, which looks so great. So I might actually turn this up a little bit more. Maybe not the most basic shape, but you want a couple little lines because we are going to deform it to add a little bit of noise. So that looks cool. Let's go ahead back into our side view here and just model a super quick little, whatever you call this, fin. We'll go into our loft again and just grab another end side. We'll rotate this so it, we'll rotate this 90 degrees, I believe, and place it. My axis handles are still hidden, but that's not too bad. And we'll just use the same technique if you put it into your loft to create this little object here. I think maybe I'm not doing it right, but anyway, you just want to model this little fin however you see fit. And I was just getting confused without seeing the axis handles if I was doing anything. But yeah, it's just real basic. Go back into our top view and we'll do the same trick and knock this down to a linear interpolation. And this one we can really kind of crush the numbers on because we don't have to worry about it too much. So Nice, that looks good. I'll press C to actually make this one editable, and then go back into my filter, turn on my axis point, and actually scale this one down and make it thinner. So there we go, we have a nice linear guy. Turn our Fong tag off by deleting it, and we're starting to get a kind of cool looking whale body. So let's go ahead into our top view, F2 on your keyboard, go into your mode and go to view settings, and we're going to drop the second whale look into here. So I'm going to grab my whale top view, drop that into there, turn up my transparency, and since this picture is the wrong size, I'm actually going to scale this up and make sure keep aspect ratios on, and I'm just going to turn this whale up like a Lil Wayne song and just position it until it's lined up with my current object. And I actually think it's upside down, so I'll just rotate this 180 degrees and get it facing the right way, and yeah, just move it around until it fits, at least for reference purposes. Or you could just totally draw it freehand if you feel like you know what a whale looks like, which I did not, I'll admit. So anyway, back in my top view, turn my transparency up a little bit, and let's go ahead and just use the loft NURBS to create this object here. And we're going to use another little modeling trick. First, we're going to create a loft NURBS, and I'll make Cinema full size again. We're going to go and grab a rectangle actually this time, and rotate this 90 degrees. And move it around. I'm going to go into my filter and turn off my axis again, and drop my rectangle into my loft, and then just position this and use the same kind of modeling that we just did. So, ooh, if I can. There we go. I was pressing the wrong button. Still pressing the wrong button. What the heck? Okay. We're back in good shape, almost. Okay, maybe I do need to see these axis points. I'm messing this all up. So I'll just kind of scale it, but as you can see, they kind of get in the way. And I'm just going to make a super basic shape. There we go. That looks cool to me. Maybe scale that guy up. And yeah, I'll call that good. And what I'm actually going to do is be lazy and just duplicate this loft and just drag it back for the tail and just position it roughly where it needs to be and maybe scale it down. And I'm going to call that good. So let's go ahead and go back into our view. And as you can see, this is not what a whale looks like in my world anyway. So what we're going to do is click both our lofts here, just hold Command and select both options, and go and click linear interpolation. And once again, just crush these numbers until you get some low poly looking shape. So there we go. This is looking all right. I might turn this up so we have a square. I'm going to press C to make these objects editable. I'm going to select, let's see, the top one here. And since it's an editable object, what I'm going to do is say include children and use all objects because there's objects in it. And let's go ahead and just click execute. It's going to jump to the YMost property. And as you can see, we actually want the point to be over here. So let's click the red property, which would be X, and we'll just drag this down to 100% because we want it to be on this side over here. Click execute. Actually, it would be minus 100%. And now it's right in the middle. So I'll go back into my top view and just line this up right in the middle of my object and squash him a little bit. And yeah, just position him so it fits. And we'll do the same thing for this other loft here, and it should be all set up. So I'll just click execute again, and I'll squash this guy and lift it up so it's intersecting the whale. Let's go ahead and grab both these loft objects and say right click, select children, right click, connect objects, and delete. So they'll become one object. I'm going to go up into my array objects and grab a symmetry object, drop my loft 4, which is the tails in there, and there we go. We've modeled a whale. And then I will just delete the Fong tag on here as well, and we'll have some nice low poly looking whale action. So phenomenal. Let's grab all of these objects together and just right click, select, right click, select children, right click, connect objects, and delete. Select all children, and then press C to make them all editable. Right click, select all children, right click, connect objects, and delete. And then we're going to do go into the point mode, press Command A to grab all the points, right click, go down to optimize, and this just ensures that any intersecting points, if they're touching another point, they're just grouped together so it's one nice solid object. So there we go. we have a pretty awesome looking whale. I'm going to call this guy Whale, and let's go ahead and turn back on our scene. So just hold Alt and click your traffic signals, and our whale is massive and crushing our glacier. So let's just do Command R and see how he's looking. He's super smooth, so we need to delete that fog tag one more time and see how he's looking. So he's a very lively whale. He likes to hang out on glaciers and go on walks on the beach. So with our whale selected, let's hold Shift, go into our deformers and grab a displacer. Go into our shading, go into our shader and turn on noise. Click our noise and go into our noise type. Once again, click mod noise and turn our global scale up. And this is just going to make it so our polygons have some variation and you get a nice texture to our whale. So that's cool. Once again, right click, current state to object, and then just delete the old one, and we just have a whale with a little bit of noise on him. And what we need to do is bend him with a bend deformer to give him a little bit of movement. So we'll go and grab a bend deformer and put this as a child of the whale, and now scale this this guy, not this guy, the deformer, the bend deformer, which I'll actually hide the scene again for a second. Let's go ahead and just bend our whale. So we'll see which way it's facing right now. That is incorrect. We need to go to our keep Y axis length and just select that so our object doesn't actually get warped. And what we want to do is actually kind of arc the whale. So as you can see, it's facing the wrong way. So I'll just rotate my deformer, maybe something like that. And as crazy as the deformer looks, you don't really need to worry if it's the right size exactly. Yeah, just do your thing. Get the whale to have some kind of movement, or shark, or whatever it may be. I'm actually fine with him looking like that. He's a little derpy, but it's all good. So anyway, let's make our scene visible. And as long as the bend deformer is a child of the whale, we can go ahead and scale the whale and put him wherever we want in the scene, and the deformer will change as well. So let's create a whale texture by double-clicking our materials, going into our color, and going to our texture. And actually, we're going to go down to effects. Surfaces, and what we're going to do is grab a, let's call it a cloud texture. So he's not going to be a blue and white whale, but we'll click into our cloud texture, and I just like this noise, so we'll make it a dark gray and a white. Looks pretty good, and then we'll just change our vertical frequency, or our V frequency, and our U frequency until we get like kind of streaks. So I might actually have to turn my V frequency back down. Just some nice streaks, and that's just a nice change in the texture. I'll turn my luminance up a little bit so he glows a little bit, maybe a little bit of reflection. We'll go 11, and for the Fresnel, we'll go to 11 as well. And we'll drop this texture onto our whale. And now it just has a little bit more character, some nice color streaks to him, and he's in our scene. So let's go and put him in the water, maybe scale him down a little bit, and just put him in the water, just like that. That looks kind of cool. He's actually coming out of our little scene. So just position him however you want, and you can duplicate this whale and change the deformer if you want to have a nice amount of variation. For the little demo I showed you guys, I actually used the same shape because I thought it had some nice kind of movement, and it kept the eye kind of rolling in a good direction. So I'll just duplicate these whales and place them a little bit outside the scene. So just with having that kind of bend look, you can kind of get the eye to go into a certain portion of the scene. So since the center point is going to be the glacier, I'll just duplicate these objects and keep that nice circular motion going. So pretty basic. Let's see, maybe. So as you can see, you can do a lot with pretty much the same object. And then if we click into our isometric view, we're getting a nice isometric design together with this whale family flying around a glacier super dangerously. So let's go ahead and just do a couple more things to get this scene together. We'll work on the light real quick, and also give the scene a nice light glow, because as you can see when I render it, a quick preview, we have a black background. So what we're going to do is go and actually create a floor, and actually not a floor. Let's go and actually create a just a background, and double click our background and create a material, and we're going to make this into a Fresnel and give the Fresnel a kind of light gray outside, as you can see here in the preview, and in the middle we want just a nice bright white, and once again drawing the eye to the middle of the scene, and we'll give it a little bit of luminance as well. let's call it 15, so it's a little bit of a glow. Throw this onto our background and we'll do a preview and just see how our scene's looking. Just 1 second on this preview here. It definitely looks kind of cool. We have a little bit of work to do on the light setup. It's not quite bright enough, so what we need to do is probably we'll go into our scene null and down into our light null and just turn our global light. We'll just crank this guy up a little bit and see if that helps our scene. So now it's much, much brighter. It didn't really help, and I'm guessing that is because it is not big enough. So we'll turn our fall off up a little bit and see if this is now helping. Do a quick preview. We'll probably still have some shadows over here just because that's the way the light is facing. So why don't we tweak that by grabbing our warm light, which is the light over here, and just lifting it up over the top of it, and then doing a preview and just getting rid of some of those hard shadows. So for the most part, you can position this all a little bit better, but for the most part, this is how you can create this cool kind of preview. And if you'd like to, what I did with the previous project, I just did something like this. I think I used a little bit bluer tones, but essentially that is what I did for the whole thing. And I also might have put subsurface scattering onto the glacier object right here. So if you go into your luminance and texture, go down to effects and go to subsurface scattering, and that is just how light goes through the object, and that can kind of create a nice light glow. And then post render, you throw a little paper texture on there, and in no time at all, you have a cool wildlife poster. So anyway, this was Matt from Mount Mograph. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I can't wait to upload some more. If you liked the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, or leave a comment. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for checking out the video. I will catch you guys in another video. Peace out.